Have you ever wondered why Australians sound so unique when they speak English? Today, we'll uncover the fascinating journey of the Australian accent, from the first convicts and soldiers, to the global voice we recognize today. Stay with us, because you're about to discover the full story behind one of the world's most distinctive accents. The history of the Australian English accent. 1. Before English, Aboriginal languages, 40,000 years ago, 1788. Long before British colonisation, Australia was home to Aboriginal peoples for tens of thousands of years. They spoke over 250 distinct languages and many dialects. These were oral languages, with rhythmic and melodic patterns. Later, when Aboriginal communities adopted English, traces of their phonetics influenced certain varieties of Aboriginal English. At this stage, English had no presence on the continent. 2. Colonisation and the origins of the accent, 1788 to 1820. In 1788, the first fleet arrived at Sydney Cove, New South Wales, establishing the first penal colony. The majority of arrivals were convicts and soldiers. They came from different regions of Britain and Ireland, London, Cockney, Ireland, Scotland, Yorkshire, West Country, etc. Because of this mix, no single dialect dominated. Key point: Australian English was never a direct copy of one British accent. Instead, it began as a fusion of many working class British and Irish dialects, spoken in close contact, isolated from Britain itself. 3. The first native-born generation, 1820 to 1880. Children born in the colonies, known as currency lads and lasses, grew up in an environment where they constantly heard mixed dialects. They created a more leveled, consistent accent, a process known as dialect leveling. Emerging features included flatter, broader vowels compared to British English, more melodic intonation, possibly influenced by Aboriginal languages, early use of diminutives and slang. Arvo for afternoon, footy for football. The accent was already distinct from British English, but it was seen as low-class or vulgar by elites in Britain. 4. The Gold Rush and Immigration, 1850 to 1900. The Victorian Gold Rush, from 1851, brought waves of immigrants not only from Britain and Ireland, but also from China, Germany, and Italy. This deepened the accent's diversity. Social class differences became noticeable. Elites tried to preserve a refined British-like accent. Working classes spoke a broader, more nasal, highly distinctive Australian English. By the late 19th century, the Australian accent was firmly established as unique. 5. Federation and national identity, 1901 to 1945. In 1901, Australia federated, becoming a nation independent from Britain, while remaining under the Crown. English was the national language, but Australians began to recognise their speech as uniquely their own. Linguists identified three main varieties of Australian English: Broad Australian, strong, rural, working class, later associated with Crocodile Dundee; General Australian, middle, Ground, spoken by most Australians. Cultivated Australian closer to. Posh British received pronunciation. RP, used by elites, politicians, and in law. Example. Opera singer Dame Nellie Melba spoke with a cultivated accent, while bush workers spoke broad Australian. 6. Post-war immigration en masse. Media, 1945 to 1980. After World War II, Australia received huge numbers of immigrants from Europe, Italians, Greeks, Croatians, Yugoslavs. Later, Asian communities. Vietnamese, Chinese, Indian, Igbo. This enriched the vocabulary but didn't drastically alter the core accent. Radio and television spread general Australian as the national norm. Cultivated accents became associated with elitism and gradually declined in popularity. 7. Pride and global recognition. 1980 to 2000. The Australian accent became internationally recognized through film and music. Mad Max, Mel Gibson, and Crocodile Dundee, Paul Hogan. Music stars like Kylie Minogue and ACDC. Australians began to feel pride in their distinct way of speaking. The playful term, strine, comic spelling of Australian, captured the humorous, relaxed cultural attitude toward their accent. 8. The accent in the 21st century. 2000, today. Today, general Australian dominates, with broad Australian surviving, mainly in rural areas, and cultivated Australian nearly extinct. Main features include lengthened, flattened vowels, mate. Sounds like mate. Heavy use of diminutives, brekkie, barbie, uni. High rising terminal, uptalk. Statements end with a rising pitch, sounding like questions. The accent symbolizes egalitarianism. Australians dislike speech that sounds too posh or pretentious. 9. The future of the accent. Globalization, Netflix, YouTube, and US media influence young Australians. Yet, the accent remains resilient as a symbol of national identity. Likely trends. Continued dominance of general Australian. Growth of multicultural varieties. Influenced by Asian and Middle Eastern communities. Further decline of cultivated Australian. White heavy checkmark in summary. The Australian English accent was born from the mix of British and Irish convict dialects, shaped in isolation, leveled across generations, influenced by waves of immigration, and eventually embraced as a core element of national identity. Today it represents the Australian values of humour, informality, and equality. Now you know the story of the Australian English accent, a voice shaped by history, identity, and culture. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like the video. Subscribe for more stories about language and culture, and share it with a friend who loves accents as much as you do. See you in the next video.